สวัสดีครับต้อนรับเข้าสู่สุทธิชัยไลฟ์เช้าวันนี้ครับวันนี้ผมต่อสายตรงไกลไปถึงมินนิโซตาสหรัฐอเมริกานะครับเพราะว่าศาสตราจารย์สตีเวนยังครับสตีเวนยังนี่เป็นลูกชายของอดีตทูตสหรัฐประจำประเทศไทยเคนเนธยังและสตีฟยังนี่เป็นนักวิชาการมีความสนิทสนมใกล้ชิดกับประเทศไทยมาตลอดและแน่นอนครับคนไทยที่ติดตามเรื่องราวของสตีเวนยังจะจำได้ว่าสตีฟเป็นผู้ที่ค้นพบบ้านเชียงครับจนถึงทุกวันนี้สตีฟก็ยังมีความใกล้ชิดกับประเทศไทยสอนหนังสืออยู่ที่สศิลป์ทุกปีครับขณะนี้ท่านอยู่ที่เมืองมินนิโซตาบ้านเกิดเมื่อเร็วๆนี้ครับสตีฟไปให้คำปราศัยที่ยูเนสโกสดุดีในหลวงร.9 ของเราในหลายๆเรื่องแล้วก็แน่นอนสตีเวนยังก็ได้เคยเข้าเฝ้าในหลวงร.9 ของเราด้วยได้ศึกษาถึงศาสตร์พระราชาของในหลวงร.9 เราอย่างใกล้ชิดครับฉะนั้นผมวันนี้ชวนสนทนากับสตีฟยังครับ Hi Steve
Hi suthichai สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ You are in Minnesota which is about 9 o'clock at night Saturday
Good night yes we're happy around the world
I'm now in Bangkok 9 a.m. Sunday morning But we're going to talk about a very important story because the past Friday, October 13, was the first anniversary of the passing away of His Majesty King Bhumibol. And of course, you have studied, you have been granted an audience by the late King. And in fact, on September 27, you spoke at the Paris headquarters of UNESCO about His Majesty King Ramadan IX on his very, very important thoughts about the economy, about good governance, and about the role of the monarch. Tell us about what you said.
Well, what I tried to say,
Yes.
But first I want to tell your listener that this was a great honor of Thailand and the Thai king at UNESCO World Headquarters.
Yes.
Because UNESCO tries to promote the best in education and culture and religion and values of all the people of the world.
Yes.
And went out of their way to have this one day inviting many people to recognize the thoughts and contributions of a Thai king.
Yes.
Not just for Thailand,
yes,
but for sustainability and peace among all the countries in the world. So what I thought I should do was to take thought and get relevant outside Thailand.
Yes.
So, of course, the Thai people revere His Majesty. They've seen his work. He was king for 70 years. He did so much to help Thailand.
Yes.
But if UNESCO wants to take His Majesty's thinking as an example for other countries, for Americans, Chinese, for French, for people in Africa or Mexico, how can we do that? How can we take Thai ideas and have them become exciting for other people?
Yeah.
So that's what I tried to talk about.
ครับสตีฟบอกว่าได้มีโอกาสไปปราศัยที่ยูเนสโกเพราะยูเนสโกพยายามครับที่จะใช้ศาสตร์พระราชาของในหลวงร.9 ของเรานี่แหละเพื่อที่จะหาทางว่าให้ประเทศอื่นๆเนี่ยสามารถเรียนรู้แล้วก็ใช้ประโยชน์จากศาสตร์พระราชาจากกษัตริย์ของไทยฉะนั้นสตีฟยังก็จึงพยายามที่จะเสนอแนะนำยูเนสโกเกี่ยวกับศาสตร์พระราชาของเรา Yes so go on so what did you tell them
Well, what I tried to do is, again, my teaching from Anil Sakya, who is at Wat Bawon, to look at how His Majesty had taken very deep Buddhist ideas, but made them practical. So if you take the Sedikit Potian, with sufficiency economy principles in English, the way we talk about it, His Majesty was not like a monk in a wat who was talking about Buddhist philosophy. he was using more ordinary Thai words to take the Buddhist ideas and make them very practical outside the Wat in our lives.
Yeah.
As people in business and in running the economy.
Yeah.
And if I thought once the ideas as His Majesty did and make them practical, then you could take them to other countries too.
เพราะเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงของในหลวงร.9 เนี่ยsufficiency economy ซึ่งซีฟยังเนี่ยไม่เพียงแต่สอนนะครับแต่ว่ามีวิชาหลักสูตรนี้นะครับสอนไม่ว่าจะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษสอนที่เมืองไทยหรือว่าต่างประเทศพูดถึงว่าศาสตร์พระราชาเกี่ยวกับเรื่องเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงเนี่ยในหลวงพระองค์ท่านเนี่ยได้ทำให้สามารถนำไปปฏิบัติในชีวิตจริงได้หมายความว่าถ้าเป็นพระเนี่ยก็ไม่ใช่แค่เทศเท่านั้นเองแต่ว่าพระจะต้องสามารถนำให้ชาวบ้านนะสามารถนำไปปฏิบัติวิถีชีวิตที่เป็นจริงที่สัมผัสได้ที่สามารถพิสูจน์ได้ด้วยทางปฏิบัติอย่างแท้จริง Yes เศรษฐกิจพอเพียง in fact is a very universal concept that His Majesty tried to adopt in Thailand but at the same time it is universal isn't it
I think so. I argue so. In English,
yes.
And when we talk about business,
yes.
when I teach this in America or elsewhere, I use the concept of risk management, which is easy for business people to understand.
Right.
And if I say the 5 principles of Suthichai Paupian help you manage your risk, people all over the world they understand.
Right. Yeah, so this is how you make your speech at UNESCO to convince the people that UNESCO could spread the Thai King's idea around the world.
Yes. So I made the point that I understand that His Majesty was very influenced by the first sermon of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Where the Buddha was talking about the Eightfold Way, the Noble Eightfold Way, and why that was important in our lives. In our lives, as we say, in the world, not just in the monastery.
Right.
The Buddha was not talking just to the monks who go into the monastery. He was talking about how every person, old, young, men, women, how we can live to have better lives and happier lives.
Yes.
And His Majesty was a student of that early teaching of the Buddha himself.
You said in your speech, in your article, that King Ramada IX drew on the deep truths enunciated by the Buddha in his first sermon as the very sound foundation for sustainability in our personal lives, in our pursuit of profit and happiness, and in our political responsibilities as well.
Yes. Now, I think Kun Suthichai, you and many people in Thailand know from being raised as Theravada Buddhists,
yes.
the different aspects of this. So I start with the problem we all have, which in Buddhism I think it's called the kalishas.
Yes.
The anger, boredom, torpor. We have these things inside us, which make it difficult for us to achieve, to benefit from the Dharma. And these things, unless we control them, they make our lives more tormented. So His Majesty knew that everybody had these weaknesses, these disturbing things inside us. So what to do?
Yeah. So did you think the audience at the UNESCO headquarters that they got the point? Who was among the audience?
Well, the audience was, I don't know, several hundred people. It was very international.
Yes.
I think by looking at faces and people came up to me afterwards that they did understand. I'm not a scholar.
Yeah.
And I tried to put it in English by saying, if you take the Buddha's idea of the Dharma, which is to be sustainable in life, and then you have to look at the kalisas, and then what you have to do is you have to build up in yourself in English it's parametras.
Yes.
It's kind of like the Thai idea of barami, but it's the parametras which apply to everybody. So if you build up, another English word which I use there is virtues.
Yeah.
If you build up these powers or capabilities inside yourself,
yes,
then the kalisas go down, and you are in a stronger position. If you are in a stronger position, you can then walk the eightfold path with thought and speech and action.
Right.
Once you do that, then you are at Sedikit Paupiang in the economy, and you can, if you're in government, you can then follow the Tosapit Rajatam. So His Majesty had a very practical suggestion for everybody to use self-control to be more responsible. So you make profits better, and you are a good government official.
Right. So, in your opinion, เศรษฐกิจพอเพียง and ทศพิธพระราชธรรม were two sides of the same coin.
Yes, I think they're parallel. And His Majesty was very aware of this. I remember maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yes.
When His Majesty took the oath of allegiance of new judges.
Yes.
He made a comment that the judge's function was to help the royal institution achieve justice for the people of Thailand.
Yes.
And that meant that as an extension of the royal institution, the judges too should consider the Tosapit Rajatam.
Yes.
I thought this was very, very wise, and that His Majesty was saying that these values of justice are not just for one man, not just for one king, but they're for everybody in government, and I would say in politics too. Because if you go into politics, you want to affect the power of the government, and you need to be a good person. You need to be a responsible person. And the Tosapit Rajatam is about a special kind of barami which you need to develop. So you can give good government and good justice to the people of Thailand or in any country. Kun Suthichai, if you take the 10 aspects of the Tosapit Rajatam and you apply them to my president in America, he would be a better man and he would be a better president.
So your president needs to understand ทศพิธพระราชธรรม too, huh?
He could benefit from that. Whether he will take the time to do that, I can't say.
But เศรษฐกิจพอเพียง was very, very timely when His Majesty, the late King, introduced this concept to the Thai people just after the big crisis, the Tom Yam Kung crisis, the big financial crisis. But in fact, if you follow His Majesty the King's teachings from the beginning, he had already started talking about the middle way, the sufficiency, economy concept all along, except that when the financial crisis broke out in Thailand, 1979, then everyone started to be reminded that yes, the King had always told us to know that we need to know moderation, to understand sufficiency, and not to do things that were beyond our control, our ability. And that's why the concept of เศรษฐกิจพอเพียง became so prominent at that time.
But Kun Suthichai, I agree, because when I met with His Majesty in 1984, and even earlier in 1961, 2, and 3, when my dad was in Bangkok and would meet with His Majesty, His Majesty was talking in the same way about the middle path. About being moderate and thoughtful and being in control. And this is, I think, what the Buddha was talking about in his first sermon. He's talking about a life of balance, balance and sustainability, which is the word we now use, sustainability. If you have to take some risks to move ahead. You have to plant your rice. You have to take a job. You have to do various things. But you need to think about that risk. If it's too big, if it's too much, if you borrow too much money, or you try to plant too much rice and you don't have enough fertilizer or water, you will fail.
Right.
So that's why I come back to this notion of risk management. His Majesty was thinking about how you could every day go step by step towards a better future.
And then, of course, there's this so-called Buddhist economy. Buddhist economy.
So myself, I'm not so keen on the Western notions like of a Buddhist economy, because I think that goes to ideas which came after the Buddha. I think the notion of a Buddhist economy is kind of like a renunciation of a lot of economic things. Don't have too many possessions. Don't have too much money. Small is beautiful. And if people want to live like that, I mean, that's fine. But I don't think that's what the Buddha was really talking about. And His Majesty also spoke about his notion of moderation depends on who you are and where you are. You know, if you're a poor person and you steal money to buy a Mercedes, that's really stupid. If you're a wealthy person and you buy a Mercedes, that might be moderate for you under your circumstances. So His Majesty also talked about using mind, being mindful, using reason, thinking about things. You have to know where you are in the situation. You have to know what the dangers are. You have to know what your advantages are. Oh, and you also have to be smart. He kept talking about that. You got to be educated. And he said you have to have good values. You got to know what the good things are, so that you don't just rush right into bad things.
You were granted an audience by His Majesty King Rama IX. Tell us about it.
Long time ago now.
Yes. What were the topics then?
Well, he was very, very concerned about what was happening to the Sangha and to many of the monks in the Watts, that they were losing a personal sense of sufficiency, of Paupian, and that they were too much involved with money and building up their Watts, and he was wondering whether they could be good. He's getting wealthier. Middle class was growing. Money was going into politics. People were better off. But were the monks giving the right kind of leadership to the people to keep to the middle way? He was very concerned about that.
And of course, his concern turned out to be quite relevant even now.
And he was ahead of everybody else. I mean, I remember being very impressed with His Majesty, that he was seeing things before the Americans, the other people, the Thai intellectuals, and what he saw came to be true. So he foresaw things in a very accurate way, and that I admire him so much for that gift.
And you know that looking back, at one point after the fall of Saigon, 1975, there was this domino theory, and that Thailand would be the next domino and would fall under communism. And of course, we look back and we see His Majesty the King Rama IX very important role in preventing that from happening to Thailand. You could be witness to that, Steve.
No. And actually, I think Kun Suthichai, it goes back even earlier. I mean, before 1975. Because in the 1960s, he and my father, Ambassador Young, talked a lot about that danger to Thailand. And His Majesty's emphasis was on the villages
Yes.
The rural people in Isan and the hill tribes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think the Thai people should remember, the older Thai people, that he had all kinds of government, but His Majesty started these royal projects with the hill tribe people in the borders with China, up towards China and Laos and Burma.
Yes.
And then he started royal projects in the far south and in the Isan.
Yes.
And he understood that by giving the people better lives and confidence, they would never go to the communists.
Right.
Because the communism is a Western ideology.
Right.
And the communists were coming from Vietnam and Laos and China.
Yes.
So the Thai people, if they felt comfortable with themselves as Thai, with Buddhism, with economic development, they could develop and promote their own country in a good way. And that's what happened.
Right.
Because the Thai people did that.
Right. There was this big interview that BBC did with the king at that time, and one very impressive quote. The BBC correspondent asked the king, said, how do you fight the communists, the enemy, the communists are coming. And the king said, we are not fighting against communism. We are fighting against poverty. And that was really revealing, right?
That was His Majesty's deep understanding that comes from study of understanding the circumstances of people and how you give people confidence in life, how you get them close to the Dharma.
Yeah. It was so wise, such a quote. And the BBC correspondent was sort of, silenced by that answer because, political questions tend to be trying to provoke answers, but the king was calm and very realistic and said, no, we're not fighting against any political ideology. We are fighting against poverty. And, and it was such a clear answer. If you can solve poverty, you wouldn't have any political problems. Right? And that was one of the very few interviews that the late king gave to the press in general, but that remains the most impressive interview that late king ever gave. ผมจะต่อกลับไปที่สตีฟยังนะครับเพราะว่าสตีฟยังนี่มีประสบการณ์เกี่ยวกับเมืองไทยมากโดยเฉพาะเรื่องของเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงศาสตร์พระราชาของในหลวงร.9 ซึ่งเป็นเรื่องที่ทั้งโลกครับฝรั่งต่างชาติที่ได้ศึกษาศาสตร์พระราชาของในหลวงร.9 เนี่ยทุกคนจะประทับใจกับสิ่งที่พระองค์เป็นแนวคิดระดับสากลจริงๆครับพูดถึงเรื่องของเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงความพอดีพอกินการไม่ทำอะไรเกินตัวแล้วทุกครั้งที่มีวิกฤตของโลกเศรษฐกิจการเงินไม่ว่าจะเป็นที่อเมริกาหรือไทยเนี่ยเรื่องของเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงจะกลับเข้ามามีความสำคัญทุกครั้งไป Hi Steve Yes Are you back จะต่อกลับไปนะครับ Yes Steve ยังตอนนี้อยู่โน่นมินนิโซตาที่อเมริกาครับเราก็ยังสามารถติดต่อนะครับเผื่อว่าสายจะสามารถพูดคุยกันได้อีกครั้งหนึ่งครับแต่ว่านี่คือสตีฟยังซึ่งเป็นลูกชายของอดีตทูตสหรัฐประจำประเทศไทยเคนเนธยังและแน่นอนครับเป็นสมัยที่ทูตอเมริกันมีบทบาทสำคัญในเรื่องของการเมืองระหว่างประเทศขณะนั้นอินโดจีนเนี่ยอยู่ภายใต้การปกครองคอมมิวนิสต์และประเทศไทยหลังจากไส้ง่อนแตกก็กลายเป็นเป้ากลายเป็นสิ่งที่ตอนนั้นเรียกว่า domino theory คือเป็นเป้าต่อไปของคอมมิวนิสต์ถ้าข่าวฝรั่งถามตอนนั้นว่าพระองค์ท่านจะต่อสู้กับ ศัตรูคือคอมมิวนิสต์ได้อย่างไรท่านรับสั่งครับว่าเราไม่ได้ต่อสู้กับการเมืองใดอุดมการณ์การเมืองใดเราต่อสู้กับความยากจนซึ่งผมคิดว่านั่นแหละครับเป็นหัวใจของศาสตร์พระราชาจริงๆทำให้ทุกวันนี้ทั้งโลกก็มีความชื่นชมและสดุดีในหลวงร.9 ในเรื่องของปรัชญาแนวคิดของการบริหารประชาชนประเทศและไม่ใช่เฉพาะประเทศไทยนะครับจะเป็นแนวทางความคิดระดับโลกระดับสากลอย่างที่สตีฟยังบอกครับสตีฟยังไปปราศัยที่ยูเนสโกที่ปารีสเมื่อวันที่27 กันยายนที่ผ่านมานี้เองครับเพราะยูเนสโกได้ มีคำสดุดีในหลวงร.9 ของเราและสตีฟยังในฐานะมีประสบการณ์ในประเทศไทยก็ไปเล่าเรื่องต่างๆนานาเกี่ยวกับ พระราชดำริของในหลวงร.9 ของเราอย่างละเอียดรอบด้านซึ่งก็ช่วยทำให้ต่างชาติได้เข้าใจในโอกาสที่ครบรอบ1 ปีของการสวรรคตของในหลวงร.9 ของเราครับฉะนั้นนี่คือคนต่างชาติอีก1 คนในจำนวนมากมายทั่วโลกครับที่มีความซาบซึ้งและที่เกิดขึ้นในประเทศไทย Hi Steve are you back
for some reason
yeah yes are you back
powering on
Hi Steve you're back
Okay, good.
Okay, you're back. Yeah. Okay, it's clear. So, in conclusion, what do you think is the legacy of King Rama IX of Thailand?
In Thailand or outside of Thailand?
Around over the world, outside of Thailand.
That's harder for me to answer because I think many of the people who know His late Majesty King Rama IX, his legacy is a very, very good and high one of a steward of his people through many years.
Yeah.
But not that many people in the world, know about His Majesty.
Mm-hmm.
We have, 1 billion some in China, 1 billion some in India, people all over the world.
Yeah.
The Thai government in some way or others will find a way to take His Majesty's ideas and carry them.
Yeah.
I think the UNESCO people would like to do that.
Yes.
So I hope that the Thai people and the Thai government, the Thai monks,
Yes.
will be able to talk about Buddhism and His Majesty's ideas in this very simple, practical way.
Yeah.
And make these ideas available to other people.
Yes. But of course, you know that His Majesty's King Rama IX legacy in Thailand would remain forever in the hearts of the Thai people.
Yes, I think so. I mean, if people remember where Thailand was in the 1940s when he became king, and where Thailand is today, economically, culturally, education, international reputation, politics. I mean, he was the king, a great king in Thai history, who helped his people modernize and develop and become prosperous and respected.
That's true. Yeah. So I thank you very much, Steve Yang, for explaining the legacy of the late King Rama IX, to foreigners, to Americans, to the UN people, UNESCO, because you understand Thailand and you understand the role of the late king very, very well. So, thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you a lot, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, hope to see you soon in Bangkok, okay? Thank you.
In Bangkok.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Steve. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Steve Yang ครับ Steve Yang ต้องเรียกว่าเป็นฝรั่งที่รักเมืองไทยเข้าใจเมืองไทยเป็นอย่างยิ่งและก็สับแสงเกี่ยวกับภาษาไทยศาสตร์พระราชาเรื่องของเศรษฐกิจพอเพียงเรื่องของทศพิธพระราชธรรมนั้น Steve Yang สามารถอธิบายให้กับ ฝรั่งทั่วโลกได้เข้าใจอย่างดียิ่งครับเป็นหนึ่งในฝรั่งที่รักเมืองไทยจากหัวใจและจิตวิญญาณจริงๆครับขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ติดตามนะครับสวัสดีครับ